Hi everyone, Ravi this side. Welcome to Engineering Adda. So today in this video we are going to see what is Spring Boot actuator. We are going to define the actuator in very clear and concise way in this video. So what we are going to do is we are going to discuss about the actuator, what is the actuator and what are the features that it brings to the Spring Boot application. And then we are going to develop a Spring Boot application with the actuator in it and then try to show you what are the real purpose of including the actuator in your Spring Boot application and how the actuator is helping us in our Spring Boot application. Everything we are going to discuss in this video. So let's get started for that. Let me try to go to the next slide and try to discuss what is Spring Boot actuator. So you can see this Spring Boot actuator is a sub project of a Spring Boot framework. You can say the Spring Boot actuator is a sub project of a Spring Boot framework, or you can also say it is a dependency or a module of a Spring Boot framework. It includes a number of additional features that help us to monitor and manage the Spring Boot application. So the main purpose of a Spring Boot actuator is to help us monitoring and managing the Spring Boot application. Okay, so when we'll include the Spring Boot actuator in our Spring Boot application, it will bring us a lot of features that help us in monitoring and managing the Spring Boot application. This Spring Boot actuator contains actuator endpoints where we can see a lot of others endpoints which help us in monitoring and managing our application. I will try to practically show you those things when we are going to implement the actuator in Spring Boot application. Okay, we can use the HTTP and JMX endpoints to manage and monitor the Spring Boot application. Okay, now the next point is why Spring Boot actuator is considered as a production ready features, because it brings us a lot of others APIs or others endpoints that help us in monitoring and managing our application. Okay, so the next point is if you want to get a production ready features in your application, you should always include a Spring Boot actuator. This is what it is recommended. This is like you can say the Spring Boot actuator is a production ready features, and if you want to make your application very production ready, or you can say concise, or you want to monitor your application, you should always include the Spring Boot actuator in it. Now let me try to go to the next slide and try to discuss the features of a Spring Boot actuator. So I have listed out these three features of a Spring Boot actuator, which are endpoint, matrices, and the audit. One by one, I'm going to discuss about each features of a Spring Boot actuator. Let me try to go to the next slide and try to discuss about the endpoint. So when you are going to include the Spring Boot actuator in your application, you will find one endpoint which name is /actuator. And this endpoints is having so many other endpoints that help us to monitor and manage our application. So this is what I have written down here is the actuator endpoints allow us to monitor and interact with the application. Spring Boot provides a number of built-in endpoints, or you can say Spring Boot actuators endpoint provide us a number of built-in endpoints. We can also create our own endpoints to manage the things of our application. Okay, so the custom endpoints can also be created to see what is going inside our application. We can enable and disable each endpoints individually, so it also help us, or it also provide the feature of enabling and disabling the endpoints that we want to enable and disable. Most of the application chooses HTTP, where the ID of the endpoints along with the prefix of /actuator is mapped to the URL. So when you will include the actuator in your Spring Boot application, you will find this /actuator endpoints automatically, where others actuators endpoints are also there, and you can go one by one and try to see and try to manage according to yourself. I will like if you are confused enough here, then let me try to stop it, and when we are going to develop the application, I will try to come back here and again I will try to explain you through the example, through the practical implementation. So as of now, just keep in mind that when you include a Spring Boot actuator in your Spring Boot application, you will find a endpoint which name is forward slash actuator. And if you go to that endpoint, you will find a lot of other endpoints that you can use to manage and monitor your application. Okay. And in the case if you want to create your custom endpoints, you can also do that. So here, as an example, I have shown you that when you will go to the actuator endpoints, you will find others endpoints as well, right? So let's say one of those endpoint is forward slash health endpoint. So if you'll go to the forward slash health endpoint, you will find the health related information of your application. So you can go there to that endpoint and see the health or application. Okay. So let me try to go to the next slide, and you can see this is the matrices. This is one of the features of a Spring Boot actuator. So in a Spring Boot actuator, you can see for monitoring and managing, you can also use matrices. Okay. So in Spring Boot, the actuator modules provide several features for monitoring and managing your application in production. One of those features is matrices, which allow you to gather and expose various matrices related to your application performance, health, and other aspects. So when the when we are discussing about the actuator endpoints, the endpoint provide us a lot of other endpoints that help us in monitoring and managing the application. Here, when we come to the matrices, matrices is one of the endpoints that actuator provides, and if you go inside the matrices endpoint, you will find the others informations which matrices endpoints have related to your application performance, health, and other aspects. And using that, you can always maintain your application according to the matrices that you can see. Okay, so this is about the matrices. Matrices can be useful for monitoring, diagnosing the issue, and understanding the behavior of your Spring Boot application. Now, let me try to go to the next slide, and here is the audit. Okay, so auditing in Spring Boot Actuator allow you to keep track of certain events or the action that occur within your application. So let's say you have one Spring Boot application and some action or the event is happening in your Spring Boot application. How you will try to track those things? So there come the picture of auditing. Okay, these events can include action like authentication. The other authentication can be successful or the failures, the method invocation. So these are the example of events or any custom event that you want to log. By auditing these events, you can have a better understanding of what is happening within your application and maintain a record of important activities. Okay, so here let's say some event is happening or occurring in your Spring Boot application and you want to track those events, then Spring Boot auditing will help you in that. And with the help of that auditing of your events, you have a better understanding of your application, how your application is working. So these are the three features of Spring Boot actuators, and this is about the basic of Spring Boot actuator and its features. Now from here what we'll do, we'll try to go to the IntelliJ and try to implement one Spring Boot application and include the Spring Boot actuator in it, and then we'll try to practically see how we can include the Spring Boot actuator in a Spring Boot application and how we can go to the actuator endpoint to see all the other endpoints, how we'll also see the matrices and the audits and many other things we are also going to see there. Okay, so let's get started for that. Now let me try to come out of it and try to go to the IntelliJ, and here you can see I already have opened the IntelliJ. I have one of the existing project opened here. Let me try to create one fresh Spring Boot application. Okay, so here let's say I have a Spring Boot application. So here let me try to tell you that I'm using is this IntelliJ Ultimate version. So if you're using IntelliJ Ultimate version, you will find this option of Spring Initializer here itself. If you're not using IntelliJ Ultimate version, if you're using the community version of IntelliJ, or if you're using some others IDE, then don't worry. You have to go to this website which is .spring.io. There, if you'll go there, the same pop-up will come up to create your application, and you can fill the details that I'm going to fill as of now. The same details you have to fill there. You have to create your application and then download the zip of your application, unzip that zip file and open in the editor that you are going to use. Okay, so let me try to give the name of your application. Let's say it is Spring Boot Actuator Demo. Okay, and let me try to select the Maven here, and let me try to go to the next. And here comes where we can include the starter dependency that we want. So let's say as of now I just only want the Spring Web, and we are not going to use the database things here. Okay, we are not going to develop the APIs that, yeah, that are going to interact with the database. So simply I'm going to use the Spring Web, Lombok, and we also need the actuator, right? So in order to include the actuator, you have to include this Spring Boot actuators starter dependency. Okay, so these three dependencies as of now I'm just going to include in our application, and let me try to create this application. Let me try to open in new tab and wait for a few seconds to download all the starter dependency and do the necessary configuration, and then we can start doing the development here. Okay, so yeah, just wait for a few seconds. Yeah, you can see here it is resolving the dependency. Once it is done, we can open our application and then try to do the development here. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do any development. I will try to simply make this application up and running and try to show you the actuator endpoint that we got when we include the Spring Boot actuator starter dependency. Okay, and then from thereafter we'll try to do the things that we want. Okay, so let's let it complete the indexing and then we can do development. I think if we'll go to the source main and Java, you can see the things are good. Now let me try to minimize it. Let me try to go to the pom.xml, and here you can see what all the dependency that we have included. It is listed out here. The first one you can see it is actuator, and second is web, and the third is lombok, and this is starter dependency and the test. All things are automatically added. Okay, so you can see we have these four dependencies of now, and three of them we have included, like Spring Boot actuator and web and the lombok. Now let me try to make this application up first of all and try to see the logs or console, you can say. Now here you can see our Spring Boot application is up on the port number 8080, and above that you can see we have one logging here which is saying that exposing one endpoint beneath base path / actuator. So when you include the Spring Boot actuator dependency, this is starter actuator dependency, then you will find this / actuator endpoint automatically. Okay, and if you'll go to this, then the magic will happen. So let me try to go there. So you can see it is saying that exposing one endpoint beneath the base path with / actuator. So the our base path, or you can say our base URL for this application would be http localhost 8080, and then this is the base URL, and then if you want to access the actuator, then you have to map the / actuator after that. Let me try to go to the browser and try to create this API here. So HTTP colon forward slash locals host and colon 8080. So why we are using localhost? Because we are making our application locally up and running. So localhost, and then this is the port number on which our application is up and running. And now if you want to access the actuator, you have to add the additional URL, which is forward slash actuator. Okay, now you'll come here, you can see. So we are, as of now, we are seeing these three endpoint when we are accessing this actuator endpoint. The first one is actuator, second one is actuator forward slash health, and then forward slash health, and then the additional path. Okay, so when you will include the actuator starter dependency, if you'll come here to the actuator endpoint, you will find this three other endpoints that actuator endpoint contains. By default, you can see only these three endpoints, but there are the other configuration that you have to do in order to see all the endpoints that actuator endpoints provides. Okay, so as of now, these are the three endpoints that we can see in the actuator endpoint. Now let me try to show you the health endpoint. So here you can come and then you have to add the additional URL for the health, which is forward slash health. Now in the response, you can see that status is up. What does it indicates? It indicates that the health of your application is up. That means your health of your application is good. Okay. So this is about the health endpoint. Now, if you want to see all the other endpoint that actuator contains, then you have to do one configuration in your Spring Boot application. Let me try to go to the Spring Boot application and try to do that configuration first, and then we'll see what all the endpoints that actuator contains. Okay, so come here to this source main and the resource folder, go to the application.properties file, and here you have to do the configuration. Okay, so the configuration is you have to go to the management dot endpoints, and then you have to do the web dot exposure dot include, and here you have to include what all the endpoint that you want to include. So let's say as of now we will only see the actuator and the health endpoints in the actuator, right? But if you want to include the other endpoint, you can provide it directly here. Okay, so this is the configuration management dot endpoints dot web dot exposure dot include, and then you have to provide the endpoint that you want to include. Okay, so let's say you want to include the beans. Okay, you want to include, let's say, health, you want to include the matrices. Okay, so you have to provide the things that you want to include here. Let me try to I think we have to remove this. Let me try to rerun this application and try to see if the actuator endpoint is adding this additional endpoint that we have included here. Okay, so you can see our application is up, and you can go to that browser, and let me try to go to the actuator endpoint and try to hit it. Now you can see we have the beans endpoint included here. Earlier we were only able to see the actuator and the health endpoint. Now because we have included the bean, we can see the bean endpoints. What about the matrices? I think I'm making some mistake here in the matrices. Let me try to remove here as of now. Let me try to include the other endpoint, which was info, and try to run it and try to see if the info is included or not. So if the info is included, that means we were making some mistake in the case of matrices. We'll try to see those things as well. So our application is up. Now let me try to refresh this and try to see here. Here you can see we have included the info endpoint as well. We have the beans, we have the health, we have the info. Whatever things we have included in this configuration, the same endpoints we can see in the actuator. Now if you go to this bean endpoint, and then see what all the things are here. Here you can see this bean endpoints is containing the beans that is created in the Spring Boot application. So as of now, we have not created any beans. So this is the like I would say the inbuilt beans that Spring Boot application have. So when we'll try to create our bean in our Spring Boot application, we'll try to come here to this bean endpoint and see if our bean is reflecting here or not. Okay. As of now, let me try to go back to the actuator endpoint and try to see what all the all the information this info endpoint is containing. Okay, so let me try to go there and see. So we are in the info endpoints and we don't see anything. Okay, why? Because to see the information related to your application, you have to do some additional configuration in your application.properties file. As of now, we have not did that. That is why we are not seeing the information here. Okay, we'll try to do it in the future. Okay, so I will also show you the info endpoint as well, how it is looking like and what all the additional configuration you have to do in order to activate your info endpoint. Okay, let me try to close it out and let me try to close this one as well. Now if you'll go back to your application and here let's say you want to include all the endpoints in your actuator, then simply you have to provide the star here. Okay, rerun your application and then try to see. Okay, so our application is up. Go to the browser again, try to refresh it and then see. And here you can see all the others, all the endpoints that actuator contains, we can see here. Okay, so you can see we have the actuator, we have the beans, we have the cache, health, info, condition, config groups, environment, loggers, and many other endpoints. Okay, so these are the endpoints that actuator contains, and this endpoint can help you to monitor and manage your Spring Boot application. If you want to see the details of your beans in your Spring Boot application, you have to go to this bean endpoint. If you want to see the status of your cache, then you have to go there. If you want to see the status of your health, you have to go there. Similar for the information, conditions, and the others. Okay, so you have to go to these endpoints one by one to see what all the information this endpoint is giving to us. Okay, if you want to see the mappings that you have created in your Spring Boot application, you have to go to this mapping endpoint. If you want to see the more details of actuator, how the actuator is working, then you have to go to this website, which is Spring Boot Actuator. Let me try to show you, and you can come here. Where it is, I think it is the one. Yes, you can see here enabling production ready features, which is Spring Boot Actuator. These are the strata dependency that you have to include in order to include the actuator in your Spring Boot application. Now comes the endpoints. You can see the bean, cache, and all, how you have to configure them, how you have to enable them. Everything is mentioned here. So you can come here one by one and try to see those things. Okay. So the configuration for the application properties and application YML file, for both of them it is given here. Okay. So you can, for more information, you can come here and try to go through this tutorial. Okay. Now let me try to go back to the application and try to show you some other things. Okay. So when we were going to the health endpoint, we will only see one information about the health, which was saying that its status is up. Okay. If you don't, let me try to show you again those things and then you can see. So if you go to the health endpoint, you can see the status is up. Now, if you want to see more information about your health endpoints, then you have to do one additional configuration, which is management dot endpoint dot health. You want to see this more details of the health, so you have to do so details equal to always. Okay, rerun your application and go to the health endpoint again and then see. Okay, now your application is up. Go here refresh it, and here you go. You can see it is giving you the status of your application as up, as well as it is also giving you the component, disk space, statuses, and other details as well. Okay, so you can come here and try to see those things. Now, this is about the health endpoint. If you want to see more details of the health endpoint, you have to enable this configuration. Now, I was talking about the info endpoint, right? We were not able to see anything in the info endpoint. So how we can see something related to your application in the info endpoint? So for that, I told you that you have to do some additional configuration. Let me try to do that. So you have to do this configuration, which is info dot. Let's say your application name is app name. Let's say it is something like actuator, something like actuator demo application. Now let's say info app version, it is let's say 1.0. Info app dot, let's say description is this is a demo application for actuator. Similarly, you can also include let's say the author of this application is, let's say, ABC, something like that. Okay, so these are the information that we have added related to this application. And if you'll go to the info endpoint, you will try to see these details there itself. Okay, but before going there, you have to enable one configuration here, which is management dot info dot env dot enable equal to true. If you are confused from where you have to get this information, you can always go to this tutorial. There you will find all the information how you have to do the configuration. Okay, so what we did, we have provided couple of information related to our application, and then we have to enable the information endpoint, and then once it is done, you have to rerun your application. And if you go to the endpoint, which is info endpoint, you will find the details there. So let me try to go to the info endpoint. So it would be actuator forward slash info. If you'll, yeah, you can see here it is giving you the information related to your app, which is saying that your app name is actuator demo application, your version is this, description is this, and author is this. Now if you want to see which Java version you are using, and what is the operating system that you are using for this application, you can also do those things. So come here to this, and let me try to show you the details for that. So in order to enable the Java configuration, you have to do info management.info. Let's say Java dot enable equal to true. If you want to see the OS, you have to do the same, management.info.os.enable equal to true. Rerun your application. Similarly, if you want to see other details of your application, you can enable them and then try to see those things. If you don't know what all the information are there in the info endpoints, you can go to this website and try to see those things. So I made the changes, make our application up and running. Come here to the endpoint and try to refresh it and then see. And here we go. You can see we are able to see the Java related things, and the version of the Java that we are using for this application is 18. And these are the runtime things, JVM, and the OS that I'm using is Windows 11, and the version is this. Okay, so if you want to see more information, you can always enable the things and try to see. So this you can see this, right? This is helping us to manage or to monitor our application. Now let me try to discuss about couple of other endpoint as well. So let me try to go to the browser and try to go to the actuator endpoint, and let me try to show you about the mapping. Okay, so if you'll go to this mapping endpoint, let me try to show you what it is giving us. So here you can see we have the mappings that are already done in the Spring Boot application, that is what it is coming here. You can see this one of the mapping is actuator cache. These are the lockers and all. It is not showing the mapping that we have did or we are going to do in the Spring Boot application. As of now, we don't have any mapping in our Spring Boot application, so we won't be able to see those things here. We are only seeing the mappings that are related to the actuator, or you can see the endpoint that are related to the actuator. So this mapping endpoint is giving us the details of the endpoints that we have created. Okay, so let me try to go to the application and try to create one of the endpoint and try to see how it is looking like. So go to the Java and here we have the main application. Let me try to create one package here. Let's say controller, and let's say create one controller here. Let's say its name is sample controller. Okay, you have to annotate this class with at the rate rest controller so that it will act like a controller class. And let's say we want to create one get mapping here. So let's say something like what I would say, uh, let's say hello. And let me try to create the method here, which is returning something like hello everyone. Okay, so we have did this thing here. Let me try to also create the request mapping here. If you want to avoid, you can avoid it. Okay, so this is how it is looking like. So we have created this controller class which is called sample controller, and we have annotated this class with at the rate rest controller and at the rate request mapping. This request mapping is for the class level mapping, and then inside this class we have created one API which is hello. Okay, which is returning a simple string saying that hello everyone. Okay, simple as that. Now if you'll rerun this application and if you'll go to this mapping endpoint, you will find your API that you have created here and its details as well. So let me try to rerun it, and you can see our application is up. And if we'll go to the browser and if we'll go to the mapping here, let me try to refresh it and try to search for the mapping that we have created, which was forward slash hello, or it was like API. Okay, we are not getting it. Let me try to scroll down and then try to see. Search now. Let's say forward slash API. Not coming. Hello. Okay, why we are not getting it? Let me try to go down and then see. Sometime it don't show. You have to see how it is returning here, so then you can get it out. I think it is API and then hello. Mhm. We are not getting it. Let me try to go one by one. We have the error endpoint here. You can see we have the forward slash API forward slash hello, and you can see this is coming from the sample controller class which we have created, and the API name is this, and then what it is returning, you can see its verbose is its method is get, and this is the pattern, and these are the like the information related to this API. So let's say you have developed a lot of API in your application, and if you want to see the classes and other details, the headers, the consumes, methods, patterns, parameters, producers, so everything, if you want to see about that API, you can come here to this mapping and you can find it out, right? So this is the help of mappings API, mapping endpoint, that help us to monitor and manage your APIs. So let's say if you're missing the parameters, or if you're missing the headers, you can come here directly and then try to see, and then according to that you can like correct your APIs, right? So this is the help of mapping endpoint. Now let me try to go back to the actuator, and let's say we also discussed about the matrices, right? Let me try to go to this matrix endpoint and try to see. So here you can see a lot of matrices we have, and if you want to access the information related to this application ready time, started time, and all those things, you can directly come here to the matrices endpoints, and you can see these fields, you can access its values, and according to that you can, if something is wrong, you can modify, or you can correct your application, and you can always manage your application with its help. Okay, so this is about the matrix endpoint. If you want to see the other endpoints, you one by one you can go there and try to see. Okay, so I have discussed about the info, health, and beans, and I would say the mappings and matrices. So other endpoints you can go one by one and try to see. Now we are going to discuss how we can create our custom endpoints in the actuator. Okay, and inside that custom endpoints, whatever thing you want to do, you can do that. You can logs the information that you want to logs. If you want to audit something, you can do that. So whatever things you want to do inside that custom endpoints, you can do that. But you have to know how to create your custom endpoints in the actuator. So that is what we are going to discuss here. Let me try to go to the application and try to create one custom endpoints for us. Okay, so let's say I'm going to create one class called custom endpoint. Okay, let me try to put it in the package called custom. Okay, add it, and let's say this I would say this custom endpoints is going to return some 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 sort of strings. Okay, something like that. This is a custom endpoints, something like that. Okay, so we are just going to create one method here which we can read it, and that method is returning a simple string. If you want to implement these things according to your need, you can do that, but here I'm just going to simply show you how you can create a custom endpoints in the actuator, and this custom endpoint is going to simply return some strings here, but according to your use you can modify your custom endpoints. Okay, so we have created one class here, and this class should annotated with at the rate endpoints, and here you have to provide the endpoint that you want to uh, look like how your endpoint would look like. So that is what you have to provide here. Let's say the ID is something like custom endpoint. Okay, or you can see custom underscore endpoint. So this is your endpoint's name. Now you have to also auto-wire this with at the rate component so that its bean can be created and assigned to the application context. Okay, so this is what, and now let me try to create one method here which is returning some string. So let's say public string, let's say custom info, and let's say it is returning some, let's say this is a custom endpoint, something like that. And this would be a read only, so you have to auto wire, sorry, you have to annotate this method with at the rate read operation. So let me try to do that, and that's all. Now rerun your application and try to go to the actuator endpoint and see. So just wait for a few seconds. Once your application is up, you can go there to the browser, go to the actuator endpoint, and there you will find this custom endpoints that you have created. Now here we are getting some error. Let me try to see what the error we are getting. It is saying that application run failed and Spring framework context unable to start web server. Go here. Abstract application context refresh servlet web server application context. Why it is not able to start the embedded Tomcat? Okay, let me try to rerun this again and then see. Endpoint ID. Okay, value must only contain valid characters. Okay, let me try to remove this underscore from here and let it be like this. Custom endpoint. Rerun this again. And yeah, I think our application is up and running. So we should not include this I would say the special characters here in the endpoints. That is why it was giving us the error. Now our application is up and running. If we'll go to the browser and if we'll go to the actuator, refresh it, and here you can see this custom endpoint is coming. Now let me try to go inside this custom endpoint and see what it is giving us. Here you can see it is simply returning this string which is saying that it is a custom endpoint. So similarly, according to your logic, whatever thing if you want to log in your application, you can create a custom endpoint and there you can log those things. If you want to audit something, you can do that, right? So this is about the actuator. And if you like the video, please hit the like button. Please subscribe the channel and please share these videos to the friend in need. Okay. Thanks for the support.